but she won't be here. And we are going to record this session, so it's not going to be live streamed or anything, but for documentary purposes, we are recording it. Over
All
to
right,
you.
thank you, Elsa. Yeah, so just want to do a quick check-in. Perhaps just for this short segment, you can put on your video so we could interact. I just want to see how you're feeling. So maybe you could put in the chat how you feel, intrigued, excited, tell us how you feel this morning. What time of day is it? Like, how do you feel? Just type in the chat bit, and I might pull out one or two of you to say something. Russian light, Cecilia, that's nice. Hi, Abanu. Yeah, I can feel you really late in the evening. Excited, Kajol. Curious, Sandrine. Geeta, very excited. Okay. Holiday season, nice. Yes, in India, definitely. Rehab, you're here. Hi, optimistic. Lovely. Yeah, Tatiana, I know you're working a lot. Excited too, Tanya. Maybe I see here Curious from Sandrine. Do you want to see something about that?
Yes, I think for me, first of all, because I'm new in GDL, so I'm very curious about this whole process of labs and so on. And I've been deeply enjoyed and get a lot of inspiration from all the meetings before. So I'm looking forward to that. The second thing is that also I'm very interested into women, domestic violence and safety of women. I don't know anything about urban cities. However, I hope I can contribute because I have a lot of experience in process improvement, metric setting, and so on. So I hear we have some experts in urban cities, and it's really something which is very interesting for the future. So I'm really curious to learn more about this topic and understand better the challenge and so on.
Thank you, Sandrine. I know, Reham, you said just now that you are optimistic. This is your first time joining. You were there last week, but you were only able to join the first 2 hours. Reham, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us how you're feeling today?
Hello, everyone. I am
Hi.
Reham El-Gibali. I am working. Hi. I am working as a senior consultant for the Ministry of Education in Egypt. Also, I am a co-founder of an NGO located in South Egypt, mainly concerned with development, sustainable development. And I am happy to be with you. Full stop.
Thank you, Reham. So that was just a quick check-in this morning. I don't want to take any more of your time, but just to capitalize what was discussed earlier, what are we, the Global Diplomacy Lab? So for those of you who are new to it, Sandrine had mentioned that a few of you had talked about it. We are like a platform to create a new form of inclusive diplomacy. So if you had the same stakeholders looking at the same intractable problem, you would just come back to the same old tired non-solutions. So this was initiated by the German Foreign Office in Berlin, and they have partners like the Fulbright program, the BMW Foundation, the Bosch Alumni Network, the GIZ Global Leadership Academy, and the BMW Foundation. So it's a very strong network of German foundations, but we come from all over the world. So like Elsa said, there's already 11 countries here represented in this room, I think maybe even more. And we are diverse. So we are diplomats, non-diplomats, we are creative professionals, and we try to seek a non-traditional, basically using innovative methods to look at a particular issue or challenge. And we've worked in the past with the ESMA. It's a former naval academy, so it's based in Buenos Aires, and we looked at the issue of reconciliation with its past history in Argentina. We've also worked with the city of Chicago on the issue of violence and youth, and we've also worked with the city of Montreal on digital diplomacy. So these are just examples of what we've done in the past, and we try to work on concrete solutions moving forward. So thank you to everyone for being here today, and back to you, Elsa.
Thank you, Eliani, for that introduction. And really, our lab focuses on what does inclusive cities mean and how can urban design, and design is such a broad word, right? How can that influence it? And, we wanted to talk about a little bit about the new urban agenda, which represents a shared vision for a better and more sustainable future. And it was implemented in Quito a few years ago by the UN Habitat. And it says if well-planned and well-managed, urbanization can be a powerful tool for sustainable development, both developing and developed countries. And as we all know that by the year 2050, 70% of the world's populations are going to be urbanized. So what does that mean for all of us? And since we are in GDL also focused on the sustainable development goals, how can that be implemented keeping that in mind, given that COVID-19 has shown us how difficult it is and that we are lagging behind? So this is just the start of the conversation. So today we are, we have three amazing speakers. We have Geeta Mehta. She's an adjunct professor at Columbia, but she's also the initiator of two initiatives. And she has some really interesting thing called the social capital credits, so which she's going to talk about. We have Shreya Malu, who is her colleague, and she will focus her talk on technology, which will form a large part of our discussion going forward as well. And then we have Sanjay Sridhar, who has had extensive experience working on this topic, but with C40s and also working with various government agencies. So I'm going to ask Professor Geeta Mehta to, um, share her perspective and her interesting work, which is, I think, very, very innovative and inspiring. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'm just so honored to be with this amazing group. Last night, I tried to read some of your CVs, and it's wow. And I really love the way that it's so multi-sectoral. Some of you are working on human rights and gender violence, or your architects are working on cities and ecology. So it's, I think this is the way to work with cities. So let me share my screen, and I'm going to make a short presentation. And if you have questions while I'm talking, I really would encourage you to speak. And I don't know, Elsa, if you have a specific period of Q&A after, but I like to hold it as a dialogue.
Yeah, and because we are a small, intimate group, I'm happy for that to happen as well.
Okay, all right. So I think you have raised very, very important subjects. What is the impact of urban design on cities? Who's designing cities? I lived in Tokyo for 23 years, and they used to say that architects design 3% of the buildings. The rest are done by developers, because developers had 4,000 people in their office and 1,000 were architects and urban designers at the bottom of the ladder. And I have to say, even today, so much of what is happening in our cities is designed by money, not really by an important thought process that really needs to go into it. And what are the repercussions of that? I want to talk a little bit about that. So let us see. Oops. Okay. Right. So landscape and urbanscape. You mentioned landscape, and I also want to throw in the word urbanscape, international to local, because I think that while, I think that Quito, the new urban agenda and the Habitat 3 made it very clear actually that so many problems around the world in cities are really quite shareable. Okay, so that's fine, but then who's going to solve them? And that has to be pretty local. I like to say hyper local. And I think it's becoming very clear that it's not going to be governments who are going to be able to do so much. Already, I think the big trend in the world is that the governments are becoming increasingly weaker compared to the private sector, right? Facebook and Amazon, their annual turnover is higher than the GDP of so many countries. Of course, they don't pay taxes in any of those countries, or very few taxes, which is another issue. So I think there has to be global thinking, but there also has to be very local thinking, multi-scalar and multi-sectoral, which is why I love the way you brought this group together. Because issues of climate change, rural to urban migration, political and climate refugees, global and local supply chains, those are not going to be solved locally. They have to be solved at a regional level, or at a, even larger level. I think the world has connected in those many ways. So I think solutions have to come from there. Let me just, I just wanted to also tell you that Mumbai is a city I love, which is the focus of this conversation. And I teach at Columbia University, and we've done 7 studios in India, 2 of them in Mumbai, in Dharavi and the Eastern Waterfront. And I was just there earlier this year, actually, just before COVID broke, to work with the Otis College of Design students in a masterclass. So just to say that, I'll make some comments. I don't know how to do this any better. Why is, anyway, I will just try to scroll and not miss slides. Okay, so then the question is that the new urban agenda. So Elsa said that we want to talk about the new urban agenda. And in some ways, I was disappointed, because I think the really big problem in the world right now is that we are measuring everything in terms of money. I think that is a serious problem. We are not, the focus is not on, it's only on financial capital, not on ecological capital and social capital, and not on governance. So I think if we begin to look at everything with one lens, that is money, then everything else starts to suffer. And I think the climate crisis and the fires in California and Amazon, which is even bigger than what happened in California, are happening. So I think that those things are clear for us to see, and for somebody like Bolsonaro to say, no, we need economic development before we worry about these fires. I think it's because we are only measuring things in money. So in my mind, if there's one thing that I really want to emphasize here, it's that I think the system right now does not work. It's flawed. It's responsible for COVID. Why is it responsible for COVID? Because neglecting our ecology and just expanding the urbanized area pushes the animals so tight and so close to humans, and that's when diseases jump. So I think almost everything that you can think is happening negative right now, I think can be traced to that. So I'm just totally passionate about that. So we measure GDP, or shall we measure something else? Shall we measure global development, gross domestic happiness, like was started in Bhutan? So in Bhutan, they hired some pretty savvy economists from around the world, including Jeffrey Sachs, and they all tried to develop this actually index. Because GDP is a measure of the breakdown of society and ecosystems. Why do I say that? If water is so polluted that you have to buy bottled water, the GDP goes up. If you get COVID and you go in the hospital, the GDP goes up. If after the fires in California or hurricanes, people rebuild, GDP goes up. But if you stay safe and healthy and grow your own vegetables, the GDP goes down or doesn't move. So, I mean, is that ridiculous, or what are we measuring? Should we be measuring happiness? And this picture here is from Dharavi. It's some people call it the biggest slum in the world, which is not true. They say it's the biggest slum in Asia, maybe. But essentially, it's occupying like 350 acres in the heart of Mumbai, which is, it was outside, right? It was outside for people who couldn't afford to live in the city, and the city grew around it, and it happens that it's so well connected with infrastructure. So now every developer is just drooling on this and wants to get it, and that's been happening actually for several years now, and I'm pleased to tell you that rather unsuccessfully. So the Ravi is still there, and people are celebrating. And it's not even a slum, it's a craft village. They create jackets for Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue and do embroidery for Monsoon and Zara. Why is it called a slum? Because the minute you call something a slum, it gives government, at least government of India, the authority to erase it and give it to a developer to build market rate housing. I'll tell you another nonprofit that I co-founded, Herbs. We've been working with people of the Ravi to really give them the vocabulary and arguments to talk to the government on why they should be the stakeholders in development. It should not be that you erase the ground and you bring in a developer to scoop up all the money. Why should that happen? I'm sorry that my slides are not clicking properly. So how are we going to measure inclusive cities, right? Income inequality is becoming ridiculous since 1980s when Reagan said the government is bad and let's just privatize everything, and Thatcher, got on the bandwagon, and then the rest of the world, including India, including so many countries, the governments have been abdicating their responsibility and just handing it over to the private sector, right? Government says that we don't build social housing efficiently, so let developers come in and do it. But capitalism, or shall I say irresponsible capitalism, knows how to make bread in the cheapest possible way. But it doesn't know how to make sure that everybody who needs bread gets it. I was in an airplane, this is, I want to say like 10 years ago, but I've never forgotten it. The man sitting next to me, I said, "Where are you going?" He said he's going to North Korea because people are starving. So he has machinery that can turn out 30,000 pieces of bread in an hour. So I said, okay, can you please not go to North Korea because you'll be taking away people's jobs. But this is the way of thinking if you're only thinking in terms of money and efficiency. So climate change, environment, and health hazards impact the poorest communities disproportionately. We all know that. And another thing is, implementation of policies, which is why I think that policies have to connect to people so people can, help in implementation and be watchdogs and make sure that the policies actually get implemented. I have to say, India is probably one of the not so good countries in implementing. They have great policies. You'd be amazed to know that they made the environmental policy in 1970 ahead of the United States and any other country. India had an environmental policy. Has it been implemented? That's an entire different story. So implementation, you can say, okay, now the big argument or discussion in every coffee shop, or when before COVID, there were coffee shops open. The discussion was that, oh, is China doing it better? They are getting so far ahead of us because the GDP of India and China, in fact, India's GDP in 1970s was more than China per capita. And now it's like, China's is multiples of India. So is that the way to do it? That's not the way to do it, but it's, implementation has to be streamlined. So what are we looking at in terms of sustainability and resilience? It needs to be, all decisions need to answer that. So every public project or every development project, every developer brings to the city, it has to be measured in terms of social capital, ecological capital, and governance, and then money, right? If we begin to have that quadruple bottom line on all reporting, all companies should be reporting on those indicators every year on their annual report, and their shareholders should be able to see that. Then we are talking. Then we can move forward. Of course, in their efforts to do that, more in Europe and Australia than in United States. But in United States also we have B Corporation, that's beneficial corporation. actually, till not so long ago in America, it was illegal for companies to do corporate social responsibility. When Unilever acquired Ben & Jerry's ice cream, the shareholders took them to court that a job of a company is simply to gather more money for us, not to try to influence the community or anything. So I think that that's where we are. So it's a huge task to push things in that direction. But I like to say that COVID is an opportunity. Like Rahm Emanuel says, never let our opportunity go to waste. Never let a crisis go to waste. I think that's where we are. So yes, we should be looking at climate, every decision we should be thinking in terms of climate resilience, economic resilience, social resilience, and political resilience. Political is the hardest. It's the hardest. In 1970s, there were, when the movement for ecology and environmental protection started, both parties, Democrats and Republicans, were bought into that. They were so close to making some big legislation, which at the last minute didn't happen. And then from 80s, from Ronald Reagan's time, when money was going to be the king and privatization was going to be king, it just kept getting polarized. And if you saw Trump's town hall last night, I mean, him and his followers don't believe in climate change. They are looking at fires, and Pence is saying, no, it's the typhoons, they always come, hurricanes, they're the same as 100 years. So there's so much denial, and that's all political. So since the momentum that was there in the environmental movement in 1970s, it's still not replicated today. And today we are facing everything that Al Gore said we will face. And then the Republicans say, oh, but he was too negative. He didn't say it in a nice enough way. He didn't say it was too doomsday. And when there's a doomsday scenario, people's brains just shut off. Or at least, shall I say, half the puppet, or the Republican Party right now, the brains in that way have shut up. I'm sorry to be political, but politics is so important, and that is why I love talking to a group of young women like here, and I think we really need to change the politics as well. I recommend to my students that join politics. If you have good ideas, go make them happen. How can green infrastructure and environmental arguments compete with concrete? So on the bottom left, you see a river in Ahmedabad. That was totally concretized, and then real estate was created around that. And what is the bottom line? The bottom line is money. On the right top is the Methi River in Mumbai. This river is so super polluted because of the all the industries along the way polluted, and then everybody's talking about the smell, and of course they're cutting mangroves that were in some ways phytoremediating it. So if you want to come up with a proposal like at the bottom, then you're going to be fighting with politics and private industry who wants to make money pouring concrete, not thinking about the long term. So I think this is an issue. So let us talk about, capitalism is okay, right? Capitalism is okay because it does consider the natural human tendencies. But why irresponsible capitalism? Why not stakeholder capitalism and social capitalism? So similarly, I want to talk about stakeholder urbanism instead of speculative urbanism. The big scandal in Mumbai and the rest of India and many other countries in the world, particularly in Africa, is the sale of public land to private interests, right? In Singapore, and I see that that we have
Erliani from Singapore.
Yeah. Erliani, please tell me that I'm right, that in Singapore, they don't sell land. Actually, one of my former students is head of the urban design agency there. They lease land, okay? The government keeps control. If you say that Singapore is such a shining example of urbanism and affordable housing, it is because the government didn't just turn around and privatize everything. They kept control. So when people come back to renew the lease, the government can again, say whatever the new thing is, that this is how much social housing we need. So it's really a shining example, and I would love for Airlani to comment on that later. But so the big scandal in Mumbai is that they keep focusing on these few slum areas that only take like 3-4% of the urban land, and by a big stretch maybe 6%. But then 60% of Mumbai lives in those slums. So are they efficient? Should you be erasing them, or should you not be selling public land to these big developers and corrupt developers in Powai, they took a bunch of public land, gave it to a developer who's actually my friend, and then he was supposed to build low-income housing, and then he built it so that on any floor, you can sell an apartment to the mom, dad, children, dog, and then they can open the door and have a big apartment, and it's no longer low income. So, the government needs to keep control. What's the job of the government? Why do we need government? To stand up for social good, public good. I'm just showing examples of mohalla clinics that are in every little neighborhood has its clinic, which is why COVID actually was not so bad there as it was in Mumbai, and improving government schools. So, social infrastructure is critical here. And and so privatized urbanism versus stakeholder urbanism and social urbanism. Social is such a bad word in the United States. I think that Biden, the Democratic and presidential nominee, I think he must have said like 100 times by now, I am not a socialist. Okay, at least think about what that means. So it's just like a bad word. So I wanted to put it in the presentation. So the current neoliberal economic system has to be challenged. It's undermining human rights, women's rights. Yes, definitely women's rights and resilience by undue influence on healthcare. As we have seen, America pays more than any other country per capita on healthcare to have a broken healthcare system. Even when the vaccination comes, they say that they will vaccinate people for free, but if somebody gets sick, they can't pay for the hospitalization. So that's the healthcare bill on the table. Environment, yes, the pipelines and total ravaging of the earth's resources. Agriculture, the Monsantos of the world have been given a free rein in just devastating the agriculture in the United States to the extent that the soil is so degraded. And in India, there was such a movement against Monsanto because if a farmer does not want to use their seed, which doesn't germinate by itself, then they can put a fence around their field. But the Monsanto will say that the air took some of our seed in your field, and now you have to pay us royalty. And Monsanto actually has an army of lawyers, and some people think more lawyers than scientists. So there you are. And so, and the undue influence of developers on cities. I mean, it's there to see. In New York, we see that Hudson Yards, you might be familiar with this new, very fancy development in Manhattan. But they got away without building the affordable housing. The rule was you had to build 20%, which now the mayor is trying to make to 30%, but they built like 4% because they negotiated, and the government just lets these people walk all over. Let me just, as I close, I want to just introduce you to the two nonprofits that I work with. This is Herbs. At the bottom, you see our logo, User-Generated Cities. And this is in Mumbai. Our office is in Dharavi, the slum that I talked about. And this is a slide from the exhibition in MoMA, in Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art in New York. And so, so we were trying to talk about street-based urbanism and how that makes social capital. My big fight is to bring social capital to the middle of my courses I teach, all the dialogue, for us to realize that that is so important. And if you keep focusing on money, you're going to break social capital. And I think a lot of problems of drug abuse and opioids and crime in United States, they really come from the breakdown of social capital. I think India still has plenty of social capital, but if we keep following what the wrong trends and the government is irresponsible, I think we will be losing it. So this is the Ravi that I was talking about. And yes, the slum looks bad, right? The housing, why isn't it better? Well, it isn't better because the government will not give them tenure. Many of them have tenure, but others, we can be creative. We can give a tenure doesn't, it could even be time tenure. So there are creative ways, but the government doesn't want to give them services or infrastructure because then they won't move. And the government really wants them to move and capitalize on that money. So what you're seeing here underneath is, to me, the best example of social capital, because in the Ravi, the Hindus, Muslims, Christians, everybody lives peacefully. It's like 90 different communities. So on Friday night, they close half of this road and it becomes a mosque, and people pray, then they go away. And then maybe next day there's going to be a Hindu festival or a Christian festival, and people accommodate. That is social capital. There, yeah, okay. So the other nonprofit that Elsa mentioned is Asia Initiatives. And you can see underneath that, help a woman rise, because we strongly believe that if you support women, you support the families and the communities. And we worked in Ghana, Kenya. We have projects in United States, but most of our work is actually in India. Okay, so the big thing with Asia Initiative we have done is we, in our effort to challenge money, so we created a parallel community currency for social good, which is social capital credits. You do social good and you earn socks. They go into your account on your app or platform, and then you can redeem it for healthcare, education, and skill empowerment. So my colleague is going to talk much more about that, Shreya. But I just want to mention that in Mumbai, just because we are talking about Mumbai, socks are actually making Mumbai-Pune expressway safer, because people who drive and people who report bad driving, they're earning socks, right? So it's actually we call it the persuasive technology for behavior change. So every project starts with menus that Shreya will explain. And then, so it's people-owned projects. We are focused on women. We harness technology and community for demand-driven, flexible, formal and informal education. Families earn socks to help their daughter's future and take oath against child marriage, or whatever the situation is in a particular community. So how do you design cities for social capital? You build inclusive public spaces, inclusive housing, not put all the poor people in one place, which is a problem in Mumbai as well as in New York. Public transportation is public space. I know in COVID it's hard, but it's the only way out. Equitable social infrastructure, resilient informal. Why are we not designing resilient informal settlements? Because for the foreseeable future, rural migrants will keep coming. In other cities, the refugees, political refugees, climate refugees are coming. So why not design for that? And then design for building social capital. And we address 14 of the 17 UN sustainable goals, including 5, that is gender equality. We are very focused on 11, and in building partnerships. So that's the end of my presentation. Back to you, Elsa. Sorry I took too long.
Thank you, Geeta. No, I think that was really fascinating. And I think it sets a lot of the context. And thank you for sharing all those examples about Dharavi as well, because hopefully if our friends can come to Mumbai next year, Dharavi is one of the places that we will be visiting, along with the RM Mill Colony, where we actually have tribals and indigenous people. So we're trying to, design an in-person program that will help them meet different citizens of the city and also understand their needs. But thank you so much. I think let's move to Sanjay now and then come back to Shreya. And if there are any questions, put it in the chat so that, Geeta can think about it as well once we come back to her. Thank you so much, Geeta. Sanjay, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Geeta. Again, Professor Geeta, that was quite a lot that you talked about. Made some interesting points that I'd like to discuss with not only with you but with the larger group over here. Elsa, how do you want me to take this? Do the people have a background of what I do, or do you want me to give that background?
I think you please share a little bit of the background, because not many are from an urban design or planning background. So they may not even be familiar with C40s as well.
All right. Okay. So my name is Sanjay Sridhar. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. I know we are across different time zones. And I am an architect by profession. I've done my master's from the Netherlands, a second master's from the University of Delaware, where I studied urban governance and public policy. Worked for donkey's years in the US. I worked for 10, 15, 14 years in the Housing and Urban Development Department at HUD, but based out of Seattle. So one of the most progressive cities, I would say, in the US. Then came back in 2010. I've been an advisor to several chief ministers, as well as the national government. And I can say now that my specialization is I work in the political economy, and I work with political leaders, even though I'm technically qualified, but technical qualification and technical rationale only takes you up to a point, because political decisions are most of the times irrational because they're political, right? For example, I mean, Professor Mehta talked about quite a bit of Mumbai. The Mumbai development plan that was scrapped for various anomalies in it had conveniently changed the mangroves into an open space, because they redefined what an open space means. I mean, that's ridiculous. That you can change the definition and open up an entire chunk of land in the city of Mumbai so that it can be developed at a later point. Luckily, it got struck down, and a new development plan is currently being made. But these are the examples. So long story short, just prior to prior to being an advisor, I was in the US, but again, more importantly, I currently run an organization known as Urban Research Lab, which is basically a political advocacy organization that looks at sustainability from a political economy perspective. Looking at climate change, looking at sustainability, looking at equity, both gender as well as economic equity, and more importantly, the ability to make the case politically is where I have now started to work. I mean, Urban Research Lab, or what I call as URL, has been in the works for, I would say, 6 to 7 years. We've done a lot of work in the past, but just prior to the lockdown, I was the regional director for C40 cities, which is a global network of the largest cities of the world. And I manage the region from Israel to Bangladesh. So you can imagine I had some of the world's biggest cities. Karachi, a population of 32 million. Dhaka is 28 million. Mumbai, 23 to 25 million, depends on how you count it. I am based out of Bangalore, my hometown, which is in the southern part of India. We were a city roads are congested, your air is polluted, your stormwater drains are carrying, sewage water. Your lakes are drying up because there is the connection between the lakes are lost, and the importance of long-term planning and the importance of building in the sustainability benchmarks are completely out of the window. There is, because I'm going to play the role of trying to think from the government side. I mean, I've heard Professor Mehta's arguments, and I'm not arguing the argument, but I'm going to play it from the government side, because that is exactly what I have been doing now, which is to say that how do you everything that Professor Mehta mentioned, how do you position that now in the political economy, in the governance of how Indian cities function, for the fact that we have a colonial history, but we set up like the United States. And what I mean by that is, and try and visualize this, national government typically has the money and the guidelines. We have national missions, right? You have a solar mission, there is an electric vehicle mission, there's a public health mission, there's a mission on improving infrastructure, there's a mission on improving public health, there's a whole host of these things. So national government typically has the money, they make commitments at a national level, states have the legislative power, and cities have the problems. And if you see the three-way kind of three moving parts at three different levels, how do you bridge these three moving parts? And God forbid if three different political parties are at the three different levels. Nothing seems to work, but it does. We are a thriving democracy for the fact that more people are getting educated and more people have come out of poverty in the last 20 years in India than in the last 50 years in India. But the size of our cities is our problem. And we have to find a way to leapfrog. For example, I have two boys, 13 and 6. They've never seen a landline phone. They've gone from no phone to a mobile phone. While I can tell you, the people on this call, that we've all gone through that phase of seeing a house without a phone, then a landline, and then a cell phone, and now we're looking at smartphones, right? Where you don't need a computer anymore. I'm literally doing more. I would say 70% of my work just on my smartphone, and I just log in when I really have to open big attachment. That's about it. So cities in India need to leapfrog that way by learning from the failures and the successes of cities around the world, but using solutions that work in India and for India, and they have to be built for our governance structure. Given the fact that cities and mayors are completely without power to make executive decisions, right? And cities also do not have, so it's not explicitly mentioned, but cities, though in spirit they have, though in text they have the ability to raise money, in spirit they are never allowed to raise money. And that means that the cities will always be dependent upon the state government, which is a provisional government, for money. When there is money attached, then there is power attached. There are strings attached that the state government will pull every time they need to make a political decision on who runs the city, how the city is run, what kind of projects are implemented. So in a kind of a larger sense, going to the point that Elsa and this group is talking about, there is no urban design in India technically, because the scale of urban design is at the street level in India. We've never had we've never had the Chandigarhs of the world where a brand new city is being developed. Indian cities, in some ways, urban design in India is always a retrofit. We have to be able to design in cities that are already built out. And there are, I mean, for example, this is an argument, and this is a very interesting back and forth I'm having with Professor Arun Jain, who's currently the chief planner of the city of Bellevue, just outside of Washington, right? And he and I have been having this debate about, transit-oriented development. And I said, in India, the problem is not about densities. We already have the densities in our cities. The problem in India is optimizing the densities across the city rather than building them out on corridors that are adjacent to transit lines. It could be a train, suburban, I mean, you name it. So the debate is, if we are going to optimize densities, who do you choose to move out? And that is a problem, because and this is something that I am having. As my current role in Urban Research Lab as a founder, but also the work that I'm doing with at least 7 state governments now, is restructuring the governance of how cities are administered. Secondly, bringing in equity and both social equity and economic kind of balance in how projects are conceived. And I'm talking about just the kind of mundane projects like improving sidewalks. Because cities across India are losing their sidewalks because that is the only space that the city owns where they don't have to acquire land in order to widen roads, because the sidewalks belongs to the city in terms of the right of way, right? When you remove sidewalks, not only are you increasing the risk for pedestrians as they are now forced to walk on the street, you're also removing the public realm. Because I go back to the point again, urban design in India is at our street level. We do not have entire blocks redesigned. And in that way, it's a very tactile kind of intervention, because our streets don't have the right street furniture. We don't have the right signage. Cities are now beginning to realize that they need to have a consistent design of how streets are put together, how the different hierarchy of streets. I mean, we don't have across India. I think Chandigarh is the only exception because it was a brand new city. But across India, if you look at most of the streets, they are never of standard widths. They are not 12 meter or 15 or 18 or 21. They are 9.75 to 11.3. How do you determine the right of way when 2 irregular width streets start to come together in a junction? So this is where I'm saying that there have been now initiatives in India. For example, in Bangalore, there is a initiative known as Tender Sure. Tender Sure basically stands for Tendering and Specifications in Urban Road Engineering. SURE stands for that. Now, Tender Sure basically meant that there were 100 contractors who would build these sidewalks across the city. Each one had a different standard. The sidewalk would be 6 inches high to 2 feet high based on what the contractor wanted to build out. And that really meant that the cities were not, accessible in terms of disability access. They were not accessible from an emergency vehicle perspective. So all of these standards were completely missing. I am quite excited to say that the Tender Sure now has really streamlined the way the city of Bangalore is now building out its streets and improving its sidewalks. That concept has now gone to Mumbai, has gone to Chennai, has gone to Pune, is now also being implemented in the city of Kolkata. Because once there is a template, I mean, these are given in the US, right? Nobody would debate about because everything is spec'd out. The contractor knows exactly what to build. That is not the case in India. So I think the the argument that I'm trying to make is, while we can point fingers within the government for what they are not doing, I think there is also a fantastic opportunity for us to help the government do it the way it's supposed to be done, and find the political backing to get it done. Because what we did is, as part of the Tender Shore initiative, the chief minister of the state eventually said, this is great. Once he saw the first stretch of 45 kilometers of sidewalks being improved in the central business district of Bangalore, he has now sanctioned an additional 200 kilometers of funding to scale the Tender Shore initiative to other neighborhoods, because we are a polynuclei city. It's not like Mumbai, where people come to the south in the morning and go back to the north in the evening. We are a polynuclei city. That means people are going all the way across. So the other few things that I want to talk about is in terms of the political economy in India. It is very encouraging for me to see that more and more people are entering and running for public office, because they realize that change has to come from within. And it has to come from people who have gone and seen around the world how things work, and they want to bring that back home and change things, because we are no longer a dynastic democracy. We are beginning to see that across different political parties. The Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi is a great example. They are a party of the middle class for urban India, and they ran on the ticket and on the mandate that cities in India are suffering because their service delivery is so low, and they have improved that. Professor Geeta talked about the Mohalla clinics and the school reform, and they've done a phenomenal job in terms of the way these services are delivered and the pain that these lack of delivery of these services cause to the urban citizens of India, not just in Delhi. But I think what we are beginning to see is more and more of the educated class are entering and running for public office, which I think changes the very kind of conversation happening within political parties in terms of bringing in equity, bringing in gender parity, bringing in cities that are safe for women. There is this very interesting concept called 880. I don't know if you've heard of that. Enrique Peñalosa, who is the mayor of Bogota, his brother runs that, which means that the city has to be designed for 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds. If you do that, your city will be fine in terms of the design. So you have to be able to design it for children and senior citizens. That's the 880 concept. So I think cities in India are trying to get their head around that now, in terms of standards, in terms of the way the cities are designed, and more importantly, the role of women in building up of the nation, because we are beginning to see there is a whole opening up of the economy in some ways, with more women in leadership roles across several key agencies, even within India, within the administrative services. Private sector is another good example, but I think more needs to be done. But I will end this by saying that unless cities in India are able to leapfrog the challenges that they face today, we simply cannot afford to do what other countries have done in terms of learning through our mistakes, because we as a nation have too much at stake. And I used to work very closely with Saskia Sassen from Colombia as well. And this is something that stuck in my head, where she says that the least polluters are the most affected due to climate change. The person who cannot afford a car, takes the bus, is the one that is being hit most in COVID, which is now, but also in terms of climate impacts, whether it's floods or extreme heat or drought or cyclones that we face. And that is simply not an option that India can afford right now. So I think they need to be able to put this as a political priority, and my role as Urban Research Lab is to work in the political economy and make sure that those priorities are identified. But knowing that positioning in some ways can only happen when you know how the system functions. Without that, you're running into a brick wall every single time. And people might say, oh, you know what, India, we can't get your head around India. It is tough when you look at it from the outside, but there is a way. We are seeing hope that things can change and things will change. It will happen in an Indian way. It will happen for Indian cities by learning from the great examples from around the world that has to be contextualized in India. So let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay. I think that was excellent. And, every lab of ours has a local challenge holder, and our challenge holder is actually the municipal corporation. And like you said, once a template is made, it can be replicable across cities, and we have to find those champions within government, right? So we are working, however, as a backup, because I don't like to have just one challenge holder. We also have the National Institute of Urban Affairs, who Prathama, who's also here, and I and Ritu, we are working with them to actually come up with an inclusive cities urban intelligence dashboard, which is based on indicators that are localized for India. And it's a big project, but it was they who came to us, and it coincided with this lab. So we are very excited about it. And you're right, I think India at this point, it is the timing is right, actually. So yeah, so thank you for that. And I know we are running out of time, but I want Shreya to now talk about, from a technology perspective, how does this SOX work, the social capital currency, and share a little more about the role of technology, because Sanjay also said we need, India's leapfrogging in, and we have to use technology. But one thing with technology is women don't have access to it. Women don't have their own phones. Women don't have access because they are illiterate. And of course, our government is doing a lot as well to make it accessible, but it's not enough. So over to you, Shreya.
Thank you. I cannot share my screen. I also wanted to just share my screen.
Try now.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. 1 minute. Can you? Yeah.
You can see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So thank you for making me part of this great discussion. Such a pertinent and well-timed discussion, and I really appreciate the points made by Mr. Sridhar. And so kind of building on to both of these conversations, and coming from so the main, as we are talking about international to local. So I agree that, that we have to learn, and from all over the world, there are so many best practices, and then bring it back to our scale, and bring it back to even further. I mean, I contextualize, but even bring it to the hyperlocal scale, to so that these solutions they do have a buy-in from the communities, and they are more acceptable solutions or acceptable strategies which the communities follow. And talking about how technology plays a part in this entire process, that, how when we are contextualizing and when we are engaging the community. So if come to think of it, that, right now, internet, the digital world, the online communities, that's the new kind of public realm we have. That's where the social media, that's where the community participation, that's where the is happening, that's where the our opinions are being built, that is where the information is being dissipated. This is where we this is how people are uh, coming together to be behind, to get behind the causes which affect them the most. I think the Mumbai master plan example, that, when it was scrapped, I remember one of the case studies, that, how one of the objections were that they were not representative enough, that, that when they had considered um, the population, the demographics, and then so many of the marginalized communities, they were left behind, and they were not. So then there was an information, a sort of a decimation, a movement which started. I saw so many Facebook posts on that how community was rallied behind this entire thing, and then I'm sure it was just a small part of the whole process, that why it was scrapped, but still it was something of a community driven. And then I remember that there were detailed surveys taken by nonprofits with the marginalized communities, that how they need to be represented in this. So again, um, there was dissipation of information, and through social media platforms, so that that there were a lot of young people, young professionals, who were engaged in this entire process. So coming to the hyperlocal, and coming to the community participation. So I really like one of the statements, I think Geeta and I wrote sometime, that crowdsourcing urban development. So that how, if we are when we are at a local scale, and then how we can crowdsource how we crowdsource the engagement, the partnership, and make our communities better, and how technology is the thing. I understand that yes, the access is still not equitable. Even in US, we're not even talking about India. We are talking about US right now. The COVID has a kind of split open the realities, that that how communities don't have access to internet and information, and their children are suffering, that okay, I cannot go to my online class because I don't have access. I don't have access to a broadband internet. So that then, so this thing is, I think we are still at a stage that is even being an impediment, but there is work on it. There is work happening on this, that we need to increase access. We need to just the penetration of internet. I think Geo was one of the Geo, just to give reference to our international participants, that Geo was one of the private internet providers in India. So which they started a revolution in India. They started giving extremely cheap and even free internet to to people, and even in the remotest of areas. So the reach of the internet, and it skyrocketed within a period of 5 years. And then, so that was something that is something that we kind of we think that that, and people understand that yes, this thing gives me knowledge. This gives me information from agrarian communities, that okay, I get knowledge of my minimum retail price for my crop, to someone that I know where to go for for an online class or some education to get a course. So that, so these kind of interventions are eventually going to revolutionize at how information is dissipated eventually. So I think coming to social capital credits and how that makes the community participation further granular and at a very local level, that people have a stake in it. So I'll go on and explain how we this kind of a concept can be applied. So it's a community currency for leveraging social capital for creativity and social good. So this is something that we can very broadly kind of apply a currency to incentivize, currency to as an exchange or a barter of services. So it's the community currency. It's very flexible in its nature, that it takes form in what you want to do, what the community wants to do. It kind of it's transformative and it's adaptive. So the very base of this particular concept is the Socratic dialogues, that you have sampling, or you have a community representative or community itself, considering how local have we gone, and then we speak to them, we understand from them, we understand that okay, how a community comes together basically to see what we want the most. So it is the democracy, it's the democratic process at a at a very local level. So the format is such that you have an earning menu, you have a redeeming menu. Then how will I earn the socks? How will I earn this currency? By doing some social good. And then what can I redeem it for? It's this. So the right now the redemption is still very local, but as we think that this concept grows, this the both earning and redemption, it can sort of broaden in its scope in going one step up the very local community level. That yes, that maybe I go I go one scale up to even redeem as it becomes more acceptable. So what kind of earning menu they can be very basic, as just keeping your street clean, keeping your sending children to school, and considering that sometimes when and if it is when it is in the low income communities, it is also about that like not marrying your daughter before a certain age, and just attending health camps, because sometimes when it comes to for in communities, these things, the health, public health, education, these things take a backseat when it's a question of survival. So so these kind of things, these kind of initiatives help them kind of understand the importance, and then doing this brings up the community as well. And then the redeeming can be, so redemptions happen in two ways. One is the individual redemptions, and one is the community redemptions, that the communities come together and they say that okay, yes, we have done so much for we have done this much for us and for the community. So can we redeem together? We can redeem for water harvesting, we can redeem for some cleanliness drive, we can redeem for a new facility. So these kind of so this the menu forms the basis of the entire program. And then these are a couple of proposals which we had made when Amravati was still under Naidu, and it was still a project. We hope it will come back. So we designed this particular concept around a community participation engagement with the government, kind of a project, that how community can represent themselves, that okay, this is they can so through an app, it was proposed that they can they can tell the government, the communities that, this is what we are missing. So basically feeding information, real life feedback, and kind of helping the government kind of prioritize that, okay, what do we want, how do we want to engage with people, what do they want as interventions in their communities and areas. So that was one. So that's the beauty of SOCs, that how you can use it in various concepts, various contexts. That one, this was for to build trust between government and from the standpoint of a community, and also for the community to come together and rally for a same cause. So this was we did do some Socratic dialogue workshops at a local at few of the villages in when before the entire. I think again that's where the political economy comes in play, that when the entire government just changed, and then the lot of progress was lost. So a couple of examples of our projects. So this was in Kenya, and in 2015. So it very basics, that that we cleaning up of your neighborhood. So creating a space. So it had an urban sort of tones to the project, that how you, even after keeping your cleaning your space, what do you want to do? So you want to make part of it as kitchen gardens, you want to make some playgrounds. This is what we need, our children need, we need as families. And then so these kind of interventions were done using SOCs as the incentivizing method. Then this is one of our recent projects, that when this was entirely community SOCs, that that people there was labor from the village. And so this was one of the resilience projects which we had in this, that because of COVID-19, we knew that the migrants have come back to the villages, there is no much work. So, and then the community came together that, okay, we need work, plus we need water security. So those things sort of came together for us. And then we supported the building of the ponds, creating spaces, and for water retention features, repairs. So the entire, they were partly and they agreed to keep a certain amount separately for a community redemption after this project was completed. So then using that, they had a dialogue, and then they decided that, okay, we want some tree plantation, because this is what is needed to prevent soil erosion. So there were a lot of lot of options, but then the community decided that, okay, we want to plant some trees, and then the trees were planted around the ponds, and as a community redemption. So they decided that, okay, yes, this is what we think is needed. And then through a in this in these particular cases, like panchayats also play a very 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 important role, which is, I think, at a government for a, this does have
Yeah,
a
would you
slightly.
mind, Shreya, would you mind moving a little faster?
Yeah,
Because
sure. I'm done.
okay,
This was the
okay, thank
last slide.
you.
Yeah, sure. Of course. I mean, I think discussion with everybody would be great to have now. So I just one comment on what Mr. Sridhar said, that how considering that even TenderSure is sort of getting local, that how we have so many best practices around the world, but then again getting local, and then understanding that, yes, this is the kind of sidewalk that you need a space for a hawker, you need a space for a bus stop, and which is something like this. So then it was kind of adapted to a very local use. And so I would really like to see more about TenderSure, of course. Thank you so much.
Shreya. So, I know Sanjay Sridhar has to run in 6 minutes. So, Mome, you had a question. Would you like to, you know? share your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for these very insightful presentations. I thoroughly enjoyed them. So yeah, I mean, I have two questions. One that I've already written, but the other one I'll just say. So the first one is basically, so what are we, Shekhar did kind of hint on that, but so what the speakers think about expansion versus developing new urban centers, because I think the real problem is population and population concentration. So when we talk about pollution, when we talk about a lack of amenities, when we talk about many of these things, I think it is because we are kind of concentrating population at one place without giving them enough amenities, and then there are less resources, and then you have more population, so you can't balance out. And so I would like to hear thoughts on that, because I also think that it leads to lack of social cohesion, which then leads to a lot of other problems which might not be just economic or pertain to ecology, but social conflicts and other things. Then also talking about development, why do we resonate development to big roads and then big plazas? So why not really, I mean, do we have to redefine development when we talk about urban development? Because usually it is about big road, big infrastructure. And I really have a problem when even in Pakistan, since we have Islamabad as a planned city, and as you were talking about Elsa Karachi, it is not a planned city, but it naturally grew, and now it has grown to a level where there's no stoppage. And the development there also, and even now in Islamabad, what they are doing is just expansion of roads, building infrastructure. So I really have a problem when we relate infrastructure development with or constructing infrastructure with development. So usually people just say, oh, are you against the development in the city, when we talk about not expanding roads, but giving a decent public transportation. So, I mean, just to kind of, these are just thoughts that I would like to hear speakers, their thoughts on these two things.
Sorry, I think I lost everybody there. Mome, if you finished your question, then maybe Sanjay, do you want to answer that?
Okay, I was trying to frame my thoughts, but all right. So first questions for I mean, on your question on, there is no magic wand, because I think each city has to deal with its challenges in ways that are driven by resources that are available with the city, the pace of development that's happening within the city, land, if it's available, there is, in some ways, land being available is also a challenge, because, I mean, look at some of the cities in Texas, right? You go to Dallas, you go to Houston, you can't cross the sidewalks there at an intersection, because these intersections are 200 feet apart, because you have 100 feet right of way on either side, right? So they're not designed for human scale, they're designed for cars. But that's not the case in some of the other cities in India, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, to some extent, Boston as well, and New York, of course, given the dense urban fabric. So the question is, I think the decision from a city to expand outward instead of developing more inward to begin with, I would rather, in fact, I will flip the question. What is more important is to define the quality of living metrics in cities that have to be delivered. And the quality of living metrics are about jobs, economy, pedestrian safety, women's safety, air quality, not the service delivery. I'm talking about societal metrics, right? What will bring people to come and live in those cities? I was lucky to have traveled to Karachi. I found Karachi more dense than Mumbai. This was, and it came as a surprise to me. I expected Mumbai to be dense, but no, it's not. I mean, Karachi had phenomenal density. but we come from similar land. So when I was able to speak to the local people there, and I said, what is it that you feel that the government should do this? And the overwhelming response was they need to be able to allow us to walk, because there is no space to walk in the city anymore. These are some of the basic metrics that are completely compromised in cities in this part of the world. So I'll let Professor Mehta answer the second question.
I think, Kamome, you have brought up very, very important issues. And I want to comment, I want to say two things. One is that actually in India, there's tremendous, and I think it may be the same in Pakistan, there is tremendous growth happening around the city. Around the agriculture land is being urbanized, and then what is being built on that is actually homogeneous gated communities for middle and wealthy people, right? Sanjay, you know about Gurgaon, right, in near Delhi. I mean, these are huge, brand new cities built wrong, without any coordination of infrastructure and ecology and social, we are talking about social equality. So everybody who lives in Gurgaon, I have a small apartment there, has a staff of 4 or 5 people. There's a cook, and there's a driver, and there's a maid, but there's no space for them. There's no infrastructure for them. There's no housing for them. So I think those cities are being divided in very dangerous ways that will lead to social unrest. They might lead to very severe security problems. And we should look at South America and learn about how the really, very serious security problems have happened in Brazil. And learn from that and not do that. But gated communities in India around every city, there's a huge ring where land has been urbanized. So that is one thing I want to bring to everybody's attention. But what's driving that is just the dollar, right? The dollar, the money, the rupee. So there need to be demand. The government needs to demand the bottom line, the quadruple bottom line, like where is the coordination of infrastructure between different projects, because they are digging their own, tube wells. So the water level in Delhi has dropped so tremendously because everybody wants to have this picture of a green lawn around these tall buildings, but the water is being depleted. So that's one. The second thing, Mome, you brought up, very, very important, is the increase in population in cities. And this is, it broke my heart. I don't know, many of you saw pictures of migrants in India walking back to their villages because all transport had been stopped when the COVID lockdown happened. But the problem in our countries, and I think in South Asia and many, many developing countries and Africa's population is supposed to double by 2050. They are not at all prepared for it. Same in India. So I think the issue, I hate to say it, it boils down to women's empowerment and their access to contraceptives. The number of unwanted children every year, according to the Population Council, is 50 million. If you add that over the decades, you see where the environmental issues, the urban issues are really being made more severe. And there's just not this focus on women's empowerment. If you educate women, if they have financial resources, they can earn money, they have dignity, they have the ability to protect themselves. And so there will be lack of, reducing trafficking, gender violence. So I think that's maybe it's a simplistic thing, but so many of the world's problems, two things. One, focus on just money. Two, not empowering women. And I think so much of our world would be better in so many ways. So I'm sorry, but that's my rant.
Cecilia, you had a question.
Hi, thank you. First, I want to thank the 3 people we had invited today. It was such a joy. I mean, I would definitely love to invite the 3 of you to my place and have a cup of tea, Bolivian tea, and just keep talking about our issues. And I think there are a lot of I think there is a lot of relations on the agenda from south to south. I definitely see Latin America in every point that you have brought, but I want to focus my attention on streamlining the government. So when I decided I was an active citizen back in La Paz, Bolivia, and then I decided to go into politics, run for a public office, and then I won and I was a council member of La Paz. And I saw that I felt that I was more powerful in the civil society than in the government, because all of the sudden I was stuck in a system that doesn't move, or by laws that don't allow you actually to commit change. So I want to come back to the idea on how it's possible to do streamlining the government when everything is against you if you try to be creative or change the system or bring different ideas. How do we change red tape, and how can we bring these incentives? How can we make SOCs available for public servants, and how can incentives allow local bureaucracies to be more committed to change? That inevitable is going to take us to national law, so they allow us to bring more change to the local level. But how can we bring less red tape and a more streamlined, effective government?
Sanjay, do you want to answer that? Because I know you have to leave.
Yeah, no, I'm giving myself. I'm tempted to stay longer because these questions are really at the core of what I do. So Cecilia, I think there is no easy answer or an easy way to do this, but there are some examples of how we have tried to work with. And what is interesting, at least in this part of the world, is most of the political leaders in India are quite old. And what I mean by that is they are all above 50, 55 on an average, right? So what we have done and what I try and do is we actually try and work with their children who are coming up in the political ladder. So so for example, the chief minister's son, where in the provincial government that for the city of Bangalore where I live, it's easier for me to make the case to his son than to his father, because the son has traveled the world, he's seen the cities, he knows the challenges, and it's easier for him to speak to his dad at a dinner table at the end of the day than try and find 3 minutes of his time in his office. It's impossible because he's got 100 different things to run the state. So we've identified, so what we've done is the Urban Research Lab has identified through a fairly extensive mapping exercise who are the children that we want to target, because they will be the next leaders of those cities or states, and try and take them to go see Bogota. We try and get them to go see how Mexico City has done a BRT, or how other cities who have gone through similar challenges have found a way to solve it, rather than trying to find a conventional solution, which simply does not work, because those conventional solutions were 30 years ago. And cities in India are way ahead of those problems. So I think one way is to try and be more proactive and by working with the children of these political leaders who may not yet be in political office, but they are getting prepped. That allows us to prep them the right way, number one. And it also allows us an access through inside the family, whether it's the son or daughter or the sister or brother or an uncle or an aunt, doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, familia is familia, right? They will always listen. So that's something that we've done, and it actually worked quite well. The reason why, for example, I've just posted a video of the Tender Shore work and how this is being done. Please feel free to look at it on the chat, and you can also Google it. But that's one way that you get more political leaders to back this, because at the end of the day, a politician in Bolivia is no different than a politician in India. You make them look good, they will put their weight behind what you want them to do. It doesn't matter in the US, Professor Mehta. They just wear a different attire, right? At the end of the day, the political economy will align with what you want to do if it helps them in their political interests in terms of election cycles. So in some ways, I think the role, we have to re-envision our role. I think for far too long, we have stayed away from engaging the political economy because it is fraught with risks. But staying away from them, I think we have risked way too much right now. Because when you work outside the political economy, you are never inside the ring of how political decisions are made. And as you rightly said, it was easier for you to do work outside the public office than inside public office, because you are bound by regulations and you're bound by the ways the government functions. So I think one way is to have those foot soldiers who are outside of government, who necessarily don't always criticize the government. It's something that I have stopped doing. And I don't mean to say that I don't tell the government they're not doing their job, but I also tell them what they need to do and how they need to do it. Because one thing that I am excited by everything that I heard today is there was a good mix of how do you get it done as well. Rather than, we all know that cities are at a crossroads in how they need to develop in terms of gender, in terms of social equity. But I think the question needs to be asked, how do you get it done? What are the mechanisms? What are the avenues you explore? And what do you deliver on the ground in terms of change on the ground, which goes back to the point that Momi made, which is you have to be able to, I mean, the question in India, it baffles me every single time I talk about it. No master plan in India sets itself targets that it wants to achieve. For example, I live in the city of Bangalore. We are a population of 14 million. There were 770 road fatalities last year between pedestrians and vehicles. The master plan of Bangalore does not set a metric saying we will reduce the road fatalities by 50% in the next 5 years, because that means they have to improve footpaths, they have to improve pedestrian infrastructure, they have to be able to reduce road speeds, they have to be able to improve street lighting, signage. There is no metric in any master plan in India. That is because the political economy does not want to be held accountable when you put a metric on it. They will say, we want a vibrant city. Vibrant city means nothing to me if 770 households are left without a family member. It means nothing, right? It could be a father, a mother, a brother, or a sister who are now dead, right? And that is a very important aspect of how one needs to be able to hold the government accountable, but at the same time, give them ways that they can make themselves accountable. Otherwise, they will simply not put those metrics in a public document that anybody can then hold them saying, hey, you guys mentioned that you will reduce road fatalities. Why are you then building flyovers? It's a great question, right? Every city in India is building a flyover, but a flyover doesn't help reduce traffic. It actually increases traffic because you are adding more road space for more vehicles to come on the road. What you need to do is take that money that you would have built the flyover and make the city more walkable, improve public transport, improve single window ticketing so that you have an integrated fare across different modes of transit. Reduce the travel time for people who take public transport and increase the travel time for people who actually take cars. Because in a democracy like India, we cannot tell people not to own a car. But what we can do is make them sit in a car longer. while get the guy in the bus to take the shortest time to go from point A to point B. That can be done in a democracy. We are not a Singapore where we cannot put a ban on the number of vehicles that can be sold. We simply cannot. As a democratic country, I think that is the vibrancy of a democracy. You cannot put limits, but what you can do, make it harder to own a car. Nobody's stopping you from buying a car, but if it takes 45 minutes to go 2 miles and it takes 12 minutes to go 2 miles in a bus, people will take the bus. So, I mean, I'm just making the case. So this is how a political economy has to be engaged, they have to be managed, and they have to be nurtured from the time that they start to become political leaders. So I know it was a long answer, but yeah, sorry.
Professor, thank you, Sanjay. Professor Geeta, do you want to add to that?
First of all, I want to nominate Sanjay to run for political office. As also you, Elsa, and Pratima, and really young people have to jump in. The second thing I want to say is it's kind of sad that the conversation that you are having with children of political leaders, we really need to raise the level of public debate on these issues so that they become important public issues, and then the politicians will pick up. So I think that's another thing I want to say. About the road fatality, I want to introduce you to Save Life, the company it's a non-profit. I don't know if you've heard about Piyush Tiwari, but it's a non-profit we are working with that is working in many cities in setting up the...
Very close friend of mine. I know Piyush.
Okay.
Yeah, so there you go.
So yeah, zero fatality corridors, and it's with them that we are using socks on the Mumbai-Pune Expressway. So yes, I think I really agree with you to find or propose solutions, not just sit there and complain. And you know, you talk about okay, how to make the person in the car wait for 45 minutes. I think we need to remember that in Delhi, the BRT system that had been set up at a huge expense was dismantled. It was dismantled when the government changed and people with cars had the political power, and they were all complaining, like my relatives in Delhi were complaining that why is one lane taken away from us and given to the bus when we are the ones who create the economy. So I think that, you know, I think it's very good what you're doing to identify these things and then make the arguments louder, not just complaining, but solutions, and push those solutions and somehow capture the public imagination. Like Shreya was saying, that using social media and you know, all the things at our disposal. So I think, you know, there are ways that we can hold politicians accountable.
I think also crowdsourced data is a very important way where citizens can hold politicians and those in power accountable. And hopefully at the end of this lab, we should be putting together this, you know, urban intelligence dashboard, which is based on these localized indicators, and invite people to contribute and use that data, if not to hold accountable, to even start the dialogue, because many people don't even talk about these issues. You know, they don't even know what's going on. Like the master plan, I know for Mumbai, majority of the people didn't even know that, you know, they should be voicing their protests against it. Yeah. So I know Mome has her hand up. That really is the last question. But Reham, I can't see her anymore. She's from Egypt. And she had put in the chat section saying in Egypt, in Cairo, when they are developing the city, they have to work around the historical monuments of the pharaohs' tombs and stuff like that. You know, so I don't know how much of a city is lost in development. And in Bombay, we are the only green spot within the city almost got sacrificed. Luckily, the current government gave in to public pressure and has relocated the metro shed that was going to be built in the forest of Mumbai. Mome, do you have a quick question, please?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I don't have a question. I'll just add to what Sanjay said. Yes, we need to work with politicians, and then Geeta also said we need to work with communities. But I think bureaucracy is something which actually has a lot to do with all of this also, because when we talk about these infrastructure projects, for example, which don't actually cater to the needs of most of the population in a city, these bureaucrats, and it has got something to do with corruption as well. And this is what I've observed in Pakistan, at least in Islamabad, that every now and then there is a new project starting, and that is sold to the politician by the bureaucrats because they want um, it to become something that, tangibles for the vote bank. So basically this is what the plan that they give to them when a new politician comes as a minister, or or head of the any ministry that they are part of. So I think these are the dreams that they kind of sell to them, and then they sell it to people. So I think bureaucracy is hidden behind a lot of this political thing. And I think we also need to work with these bureaucrats, because at least for Pakistan, I can speak, because they are trained to actually, because they're not really subject experts, but basically they come to a ministry and they're looking for either it is corruption, or either, or sometimes.
Again, we lost you.
Yeah, no, I've completed my point. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Barbara, you switched on your video. Do you want to say something?
No, I just can say that it's really mind-blowing. Thank you for the presentation and speeches. Very excited. Yeah, but I didn't want to add to the discussion at this point. Thank you, Elsa.
Okay. Lynn, do you want to say something?
No, I'm good for now, but I do want to make a quick point to what Professor Mehta was saying earlier about Singapore. And that's true what she said, because there's no really actual sales. Like, I was in the government for over 10 years. And when we deal with MNCs, multinational corporations, the lease can go up to 30 years, but that's not typical. And then when it comes to private ownership, it goes from 99 years to 999 years to freehold. But the freehold properties are very rare, and they go for astronomical prices. Most of the time it's 99 years or 999 years. And so the property valuation will go down as you get nearer to the end of the tenure. But she's absolutely right. That's how the government has a keyhole in what's going on. And there's always a master plan for like 30 years ahead. And I was involved in quite a few of them.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay.
And if I can just quickly come in, I just saw a comment, not a comment, but one of the presentations, I think Shreya had made that presentation on the fact that governments necessarily don't have the money. I will disagree a little bit there. It's not about having the money, it's where they spend the money. It's a spending problem, not a sourcing problem. There is enough money to be spent. It's just spent in the on wrong projects that don't deliver any value to citizens in India. Whether it is building because I mean, take the case of Mumbai. 8% of Mumbai's population who take cars consume 70% of the municipal corporation's budget, which is maintenance of roads. Right? There is something wrong there.
And also Mumbai is the richest municipality, but it has such crappy infrastructure.
I mean, so as I said, it is not a problem of money. Mumbai is an exception in that way, but generally looking across India, and I've worked quite a bit in Bangladesh and in the Middle East as well. The problem is not sourcing of money. The problem is spending. The governments are way too quick to spend the money because they have to show that they have done something on the ground, even if it's crappy. That needs to change. And that can change when they start to deliver good quality projects that can be scaled, that can get political and people to back it, because people start experiencing what it is to walk on a street like you were walking in New York. right? And that is the experience that we need to bring. So please, I will urge all of you to look at the TenderSure link that I have sent. I'm not campaigning for TenderSure, but I'm giving you an example of how cities can change and how cities can learn from one another. So I think the GDL is a great example where, because I think when you put another thing, just to answer Cecilia's question, I have seen that when you put a political leader shoulder to shoulder with a political leader of another city or another country who has solved the same problem, you can use the diplomacy channel to get these political leaders to talk to each other. And that is a very powerful bridge to establish, because a politician can only think like a politician. They cannot think on technical terms unless we find technical people running for office. Right? That's not going to happen in my lifetime, probably my kids, right? But hopefully we're trying to change that status quo. So I think the question is, and I say this with extensive experience of having seen this. When I got the mayor of Bangalore to stand shoulder to shoulder with the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, I had put into the London mayor's ear to tell the mayor of Bangalore, saying, I would be willing to help you if you are willing to commit to clean up the air in your city. And magic happened. On the podium, the mayor of Bangalore made a public commitment to clean up the air in the next 10 years. That would not have happened if I had not got him to stand next to the mayor of London. So there is peer-to-peer pressure and competition and learning that needs to happen, and we need to find and leverage those peer-to-peer political level engagement. Because because then once he's made a public commitment, now we can hold him accountable for it. But that commitment would not have come if Mayor Sadiq Khan had not put it into his ear and urged the mayor of Bangalore to say, I'm willing to help you, but you make the commitment first. So your point about hyper-local, London has the ultra low emission zone, the ULEZ, right? Bangalore is now going to do a ULEZ version in our city, where they're creating a congestion zone. They are going to ban all fossil fuel vehicles entering the city. And the smart thing that they've done is this congestion zone also has the maximum concentration of schools. That means there are kids coming out. So when you clean up the air, the kids will go and tell their parents, stop using fossil fuel cars or start to walk. So you create a generational change in the way people think about how they commute in the city. So you go target the politicians' children, you go after younger children, the 880 concept, right? So you try and align all of these different things, but at the end of the day, political peer-to-peer pressure goes a long, long way in getting your political leaders to make a commitment that they would not have done otherwise. So,
well, thank you so much, because that is exactly what the GDL is all about. And also what the BMW Foundation's global tables are about, bringing people together to discuss all these major issues and put that peer pressure together and also learn from each other. I think capacity building is not enough. So anyway, we've completely run out of time. So thank you, Professor Geeta Mehta, Sanjay Sridhar, Shreya Malu, for your wisdom. It was really fascinating. I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. And those who had to leave, asked for the recording. So we have the recording, but don't leave just yet, because now Supreet's going to take over and explain what's coming up in India.
All right, I gotta go, guys. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. And I normally just come in towards the end of every session. That's been such a wonderful set of discussions between people. So it was great to listen to everyone. And most of us have left. But I think for those who are still here, I think it's very important for you to know what starts tomorrow, because you know, sometimes it is just destined that this will happen. So today we do this incubator, and tomorrow we start a festival in India which is called Navratri, which literally means 9 nights. So it's a festival which is celebrated in different parts of India in a different manner altogether, in the 4 different directions: north, east, south, and west. The festival is about the win of good over evil. So, as in how we shift from geographically from one part of India to another, a different goddess is prayed to. So in the northwestern part, it's the Ram Leela. It's the story about God Rama and his win over evil. And in Bengal and east, northern east parts of India, it's a prayer for the goddess. So we all pray to the goddess, and we pray for her win over evil. She killed a demon at the end of these 9 days. So there are prayers for her, and it's a festival of lights. And at the end of the 9 days, we burn an effigy which is synonymous to the evil in the world, or we just put it in the water, so which is called the Shera. And 20 days from then, we celebrate what is called Diwali. I think most of the people across the world know about Diwali, but Navratri hasn't been such a popular festival because it involves it's a community kind of a celebration where people come together and dance through the nights, and it's famous for the dance. So the dance is called Garba, and you're supposed to play with sticks. So you have this, these are not the sticks, these are my hair sticks, which I'm just using to explain. People can use their pens if they have. So they play with the sticks and they go round in circles with these in their hands, and they get experimental with whatever they want to do. So I'm going to play a little song for a little while, so just that you get a glimpse and an idea and a little bit of, you know, that smell of how it is to be in a garba. And you can be experimental with the pens or pencils or sticks that you have. So I'm going to play the song. Elsa, do you want me to share the song on the screen? You're on mute.
Yes, fine.
Yeah, so it's a song from a movie. I picked this one up because it shows how India looks during this festival. There are lights, people are dressed up in finery, a lot of red and gold going around. The ladies might not be using sticks in this. I couldn't find something which could, you know, bring everything together, but they're moving their hands as if they have sticks in their hands. So let's play this song, okay? Elsa, just tell me if you can see the screen. Can you see the screen? Glimpse of how it is. I know we can't do much here. I was telling Elsa, we can only get so much experimental, you know, I mean, can't do more than that, but that's how we celebrate Navratri, and it's a spirit of the womanhood of the goddess in all of us that we celebrate. So let's wish all of you a beautiful Navratri. It's starting tomorrow. So the goddess in you, wish that it comes up and it blossoms and you take over the evil in the world. Over to you, Elsa.
Thanks, Supreet, and thank you everyone for sticking around. Thank you, Professor Geeta Mehta. I really enjoyed your talk.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.